Hello, and welcome to Whispers of Earth, a quiet corner where the universe slows down, where curiosity drifts like stardust, and science becomes a lullaby. Tonight, we begin at the beginning, not of life, not of mountains or oceans, but of everything we now call home. This is the story of how our world, the ground beneath your feet, the sky above your roof, the water that sings through rivers, first came into being. So find a place to rest. Let your breath fall in rhythm with the earth's quiet pulse. And let's travel back, far beyond memory, beyond history, to a time before there was even a sky to remember. Before Earth had a name. Imagine a universe still humming from its birth, stars forming and dying in a restless cosmic sea. Long before our sun lit the sky, long before there were days or nights, the universe was already busy creating the ingredients for a world that didn't yet exist. In the heart of ancient stars, elements were forged: carbon, oxygen, silicon, iron. When those stars reached the end of their lives, they exploded in supernovas, scattering their ashes into space. From those ashes, the dust of dead suns, new stars, new worlds, and eventually our world would be born. It's humbling to think that the same iron that moves in your blood once shimmered in the core of a star that died billions of years ago. The calcium in your bones, the carbon in your breath, all of it was forged in cosmic fire. We are, quite literally, made of ancient light. 2. The solar nursery. About 4.6 billion years ago, somewhere in a quiet arm of the Milky Way, a vast cloud of gas and dust began to collapse under its own gravity. This cloud, the solar nebula, was the birthplace of our solar system. As it fell inward, it began to spin, faster and faster, flattening into a glowing disk. At its center, heat and pressure grew until hydrogen atoms fused and ignited. A new star was born, our sun. Around that newborn light, the remaining dust and ice swirled in a gentle but chaotic dance. Tiny grains clumped together, colliding, sticking, growing, millimeter by millimeter, pebble by pebble, mountain by mountain, into the seeds of planets. There were no gentle orbits then, only collisions and chaos. The early solar system was a place of violence, of creation through destruction. Each impact melted rock, shattered surfaces, and scattered fragments into space. And yet, through that turmoil, order began to take shape. 3. A molten world. Among the newborn worlds was one small, glowing sphere, still molten, spinning quickly, gathering mass from every passing fragment. This was Proto-Earth. It had no oceans, no continents, no life, only rivers of lava and an atmosphere thick with steam and carbon dioxide. The young planet radiated heat like a small star. Each new impact churned its surface, keeping it alive with fire. But even in this inferno, something remarkable was beginning to happen. Heavy elements like iron and nickel were sinking toward the planet's center, forming a dense metallic core. Lighter elements floated upward, forming the mantle and crust. Earth was separating into layers, beginning to take the shape we know today. And deep within that molten heart, motion began, swirling metal generating a magnetic field. It would become our planet's shield, protecting it from solar winds and preserving the fragile ingredients of life that had not yet appeared. The Earth, still glowing and restless, was slowly learning how to endure. 4. The collision that made the moon. Then, one day, or perhaps over many days blurred into one violent event, something enormous appeared on the horizon of this young world. A wandering planet, roughly the size of Mars, crossed paths with Earth. We call it Theia. The impact that followed was beyond comprehension, a collision so massive it nearly tore the planet apart. Mountains of molten rock vaporized in seconds. Earth's outer layers were hurled into space. And from that halo of glowing debris, gravity sculpted a new companion, the moon. The moon would soon become much more than decoration in the night sky. It would steady the Earth's spin, soften its seasons, and create tides that would one day stir the chemistry of life itself. The two, Earth and Moon, were born of the same wound, bound forever by gravity and memory. When you look at the moon tonight, you are seeing a piece of Earth that left home 4.5 billion years ago. 5. Cooling the fire. For millions of years after the impact, Earth remained molten, a red, glowing marble adrift in the black sea of space. But slowly, the violence waned. The collisions grew fewer. The planet began to cool. Volcanoes still roared, and the air shimmered with heat, but high above, water vapor began to condense. It formed clouds, thick and dark, and for the first time in Earth's history, it rained. And it did not stop. For centuries, perhaps for millions of years, rain fell upon the burning crust, hissing, steaming, carving. Drop by drop, it filled the lowlands, cooled the lava, and gathered into vast oceans. The Earth was no longer a world of fire. It was now a world of water. Imagine standing there, if you could. No life yet, no sound but thunder and the endless hiss of rain. The sky orange and heavy, the ocean beneath it green with dissolved minerals. The first seas were not calm, but they were alive in their own way, boiling, shifting, filled with the restless chemistry that would one day become us. 6. The first solid ground. As the planet cooled, the surface began to harden. Islands of rock rose through the mist, the earliest continents, fragile and newborn. We know them today only through fragments, ancient zircons found in the rocks of Australia and Canada. These tiny crystals, smaller than a grain of sand, hold within them the memory of that first solid crust. Their chemical signatures tell us that even then, just 160 million years after the solar system began, Earth already had land and liquid water. In cosmic time, that's almost instant. Earth, it seems, was eager to become itself. 7. A silent ocean world. Now, with fire subdued and water abundant, the Earth began its long quiet chapter. There was no life yet, but the conditions were gathering, oceans rich in minerals, volcanic vents releasing heat and gases, sunlight filtering weakly through a heavy, hazy sky. The planet was silent but not still. The crust shifted and cracked, forming primitive tectonic plates. Volcanoes breathed gases that built the early atmosphere. Hydrothermal vents on the seafloor created pockets of chemical wonder, places where heat, minerals, and water danced together in endless reactions. In those dark depths, the stage was set for the next miracle, the spark of life. But that's a story we'll drift into, next time. For now, imagine the newborn Earth from space, a world still steaming, ringed by clouds, blue oceans churning beneath a dim sun. The moon glows softly nearby, keeping watch like a silent guardian. It's hard to imagine, perhaps, but every forest, every city, every breath of air began right here, in the chaos and calm of those first days. The world was young. The stars were close. And the universe was listening. This has been part 1 of Whispers of Earth, the Birth of a Planet. A journey through fire, water, and time, the opening note in Earth's long, patient song. If you're still awake, let the rhythm of that story fade with your breath. And if you've drifted away, the Earth will keep turning, softly, quietly, beneath the same stars that once made it. The fires of creation had dimmed. The Earth, once a glowing ember adrift in the dark, had cooled enough to wear a thin crust, like skin over a beating heart. But peace, on a young planet, is never still for long. Where fire once ruled, water began to reign. And the newborn oceans, vast, restless, endless, covered the planet like a mirror of the sky that would one day appear above them. 1. The endless rain. Imagine standing on the surface of that early Earth, if standing were even possible. The air was heavy, thick with steam and carbon dioxide. Lightning flickered in copper-colored clouds. Rain fell not in drops, but in sheets, an endless downpour that blurred the line between ocean and sky. Each drop carried with it the memory of volcanic heat. Every thunderclap echoed through an atmosphere trying to decide what it would become. For millions of years, this storm went on. Rivers did not yet exist, there was nowhere for them to run. Instead, water pooled in low places, forming oceans that grew until they swallowed almost everything. Only scattered islands of dark volcanic rock broke the horizon, temporary refuges in a boundless sea. And beneath the waves, something extraordinary was happening. 2. The alchemy of the deep. In the darkness of the young ocean floor, cracks opened in the crust. Through them, superheated water rich in metals and minerals gushed into the sea. These were the first hydrothermal vents, chimneys of heat and chemistry, exhaling the breath of the planet itself. Around them, minerals combined and separated in strange dances of attraction and release. Iron, sulfur, carbon, all meeting in an environment both violent and nurturing. Scientists today believe these vents may have been the wombs of life. In their shadowed plumes, where water met fire, complex molecules began to assemble, chains of carbon that could store energy, react, maybe even copy themselves. It was chemistry poised on the edge of biology. And though no eyes yet saw it, something in that deep quiet began to stir. 3. A planet that could breathe. Even before life, the planet was busy learning its own rhythms. Volcanoes exhaled gases, carbon dioxide, methane, water vapor, sulfur. The oceans absorbed some, the sky kept the rest. Slowly, the first atmospheric cycles began. Carbon dissolved in rainwater and sank into the crust, volcanoes sent it back again. It was a planetary breath, inhale, exhale, over ages longer than memory. This was the beginning of Earth's climate system, crude but determined. The balance between air and stone, between fire and rain, between what the planet gave and what it kept. And though no living creature depended on it yet, this balance would one day be the reason life could exist at all. 4. The first continents rise. Beneath the oceans, the crust of the earth moved and folded. Heat from the mantle pushed upward, cracking and lifting the seabed into islands and fragments of land. These were the first protocontinents, small, unstable, and scattered like stepping stones on a dark sea. They were built of lighter rock, granite rather than basalt, and that made them float higher on the molten mantle. We see their ghosts today in places like Western Australia, Greenland, and Canada, ancient shields of stone, the bones of continents that never truly died. If you could walk there, you would feel the ground trembling underfoot. Volcanoes hissed, and the sky glowed red with their plumes. Lava flowed into the sea, meeting the water in explosions of steam. Yet even amid that violence, the crust cooled, hardened, and aged. For the first time, Earth began to hold its shape. 5. The sky without blue. Look upward, in imagination, to the sky of the early Earth. It wasn't the soft cerulean we know. It was thick, amber and rose, maybe even greenish-gray, filled with dust and gas. The sun, still weaker than today, appeared as a dull golden disk, its light filtered through haze. And yet, even through that haze, energy poured down, energy that would drive storms, waves, and eventually life. Lightning crackled over the oceans, splitting molecules apart, creating new ones. In the mist, chemical compounds fell like invisible snow, settling into the water below. The oceans became a cauldron of possibility. It is here, many believe, that the building blocks of life began to form, not in peace, but in storm. 6. The memory in a stone. In the 1960s, deep in the red heart of Western Australia, geologists found something unexpected. Tiny pebbles, smooth and rounded, trapped in rock over 3.4 billion years old. They looked as though they had been worn by running water, by rivers. Rivers. That discovery changed everything. It meant that even in those ancient days, the earth already had rain that gathered, flowed, carved. There was weather, erosion, cycles of time. It meant the planet had matured. Not entirely calm, but balanced enough for rivers to sing across its surface, long before trees or fish or even bacteria we know today. 7. The first whispers of life. Around 3.8 billion years ago, just when the Earth was settling into a rhythm, the first traces of life appeared. They were not plants, not animals, not even cells as we know them. They were tiny chemical systems, perhaps built of RNA, capable of copying themselves and capturing energy. They floated in warm shallow seas or clung to minerals around volcanic vents. Each was fragile, so fragile that most would fail within moments. But a few endured. They divided, multiplied, changed. And in that endless repetition, something new emerged: persistence. From that persistence came lineage. And from lineage, evolution. The first organisms, microbes, simple and ancient, were born into a world that barely noticed. But the planet would never be the same. 8. The ocean turns green. As life multiplied in the seas, the chemistry of the planet began to shift. Microbes released gases, feeding on minerals, changing the balance of carbon and methane. The oceans grew rich in iron and sulfur, tinted green and brown by the elements dissolved within them. If you could look at Earth then from space, it would not yet be the blue planet. It would shimmer in shades of jade and copper, wrapped in clouds of steam. It was alien, and yet, it was home. 9. The planet that never slept. Even as life began, the planet remained restless. Earthquakes rippled through the new crust. Asteroids still wandered the inner solar system, striking from time to time with unimaginable force. Each impact could boil oceans, darken skies, and erase entire lineages of microbes. And yet, life persisted. This resilience would become the hallmark of our planet, its quiet defiance. No matter the fire, no matter the freeze, life found a way to return. 10. The long quiet. After billions of years of chaos, Earth entered a kind of equilibrium. The continents shifted slowly. The rain softened. The oceans, though still hot and mineral-rich, calmed. The sky cleared just enough for sunlight to reach deeper waters. Photosynthesis, in its most primitive form, began. Tiny organisms learned to use light, turning the energy of the sun into the first whispers of oxygen. It was the faintest breath of a future world. The air would not fill with oxygen for another billion years, but the seed of that transformation had been planted. And somewhere, in those dim green seas, life continued its patient work. The earth had survived its birth. It had cooled, breathed, and given rise to life. Now, for the first time, the planet and its living children would begin to shape each other, stone influencing cell, cell influencing stone. It was the beginning of a dialogue that continues to this day. Next time, we'll journey deeper into that conversation, into the world before color, before oxygen, when the oceans were green and the sky was red, and yet the planet was preparing to bloom. For now, rest in the rhythm of that ancient sea. The same sea that still moves inside you. Next time, we'll journey deeper into that conversation, into the world before color, before oxygen, when the oceans were green and the sky was red, and yet the planet was preparing to bloom. For now, rest in the rhythm of that ancient sea. The same sea that still moves inside you. This was part 2 of Whispers of Earth, the world of storms and stone. Thank you for listening, and may your dreams drift somewhere between starlight and tide. The world has known fire. It has known flood. Now it will learn to breathe. For more than 1 billion years, the oceans of the young Earth had been alive but quiet, a hidden garden of microbes, greenish waters shimmering under a pale orange sky. Life was content in darkness and chemical warmth. It neither saw nor spoke, and it asked nothing of the air above. But deep within those silent seas, something new was forming, a trick of sunlight, a way to turn light itself into food. And with it came the planet's most powerful transformation. 1. The invention of light. Among the countless single-celled organisms floating in shallow waters were tiny architects called cyanobacteria. They were humble, just threads of life no thicker than silk, yet they discovered a secret that would rewrite the chemistry of the world. Using the energy of the sun, they began to split water molecules, stealing their hydrogen and setting their oxygen free. It was a small reaction on a small scale, but the effect was immense. For the first time, oxygen, a gas unknown to the ancient Earth, began to leak into the ocean, molecule by molecule, invisible but unstoppable. 2. The rusting of the seas. Oxygen was a stranger here. The oceans were filled with dissolved iron, and iron loves oxygen. As the two met, they embraced violently, forming oxides, rust, that sank to the seafloor in slow crimson rain. Layer upon layer, those rusted sediments built stripes of rock we still find today, banded iron formations, red and black ribbons running through cliffs in Australia, Canada, and South Africa. They are the planet's first diary entries written in color. Each stripe whispers of a time when oxygen rose and fell, when microbes thrived and tides shifted. The Earth was painting its own history. 3. The Great Oxygenation. Eventually, the iron ran out. The seas could hold no more rust. Oxygen, unbound, began to escape into the air. At first it was tentative, fragile. It reacted with everything it touched, rocks, gases, minerals, but still it grew. And when its climb became unstoppable, the Earth changed forever. This event, the Great Oxygenation Event, about 2.4 billion years ago, was not a sudden flash but a slow awakening, a breath drawn over millions of years. To the microbes of that time, oxygen was not a gift. It was poison. Many perished, unable to survive in the presence of this new, reactive gas. Whole ecosystems vanished quietly beneath the waves. It was Earth's first mass extinction, a silent apocalypse. Yet even as life retreated, the planet itself was learning to breathe. 4. The sky turns blue. Before oxygen, the air had been thick with methane and haze. Sunlight filtered through in dull orange tones, painting the world in perpetual dusk. But as oxygen accumulated, the chemistry of the sky changed. Methane broke apart, the haze thinned. Sunlight, for the first time, scattered through a clear atmosphere, and the sky turned blue. It was as if the planet had opened its eyes. High above, oxygen molecules fused into a delicate shield of ozone, O3, filtering the harsh ultraviolet rays that once scoured the surface. The world had gained a veil, and beneath it, gentler light fell on the oceans. 5. The freeze. Oxygen's arrival was a miracle for chemistry, but it brought unintended consequences. When methane vanished, the planet lost much of its natural warmth. Sunlight reflected off the clearing skies, and temperatures plummeted. Ice crept outward from the poles, bright and reflective, bouncing still more light back into space. Within a few million years, glaciers reached the equator. Earth had entered its first snowball state, a global winter that may have locked the oceans beneath kilometers of ice. But beneath that frozen skin, the planet did not die. Volcanoes continued to breathe carbon dioxide, and slow chemical reactions beneath the ice released heat. Life hid in vents and cracks, in tiny oases where the sea still simmered. For millions of years, it waited. 6. The long thaw. The same volcanoes that cooled the world would eventually warm it again. As carbon dioxide built up, sunlight found its way back in. The ice began to melt, first in trickles, then in torrents. Massive floods roared across continents, washing minerals and nutrients into the oceans. When the thaw was complete, the earth was reborn, its air now breathable, its seas infused with new chemistry. It was a cleansing, a resetting of the stage. The planet had learned the rhythm of balance, freeze and flood, silence and song. 7. The color of oceans. The new oxygenated seas no longer shimmered in green and brown. They deepened to blue, their surfaces alive with microbial mats, carpets of tiny architects building structures of calcium and life. These were stromatolites, colonies of microbes stacking themselves layer upon layer, reaching toward light. Even now, in places like Shark Bay in Australia, their descendants grow in the shallows, unchanged across billions of years. If you could float above those ancient seas, you'd see rippling patterns like underwater mosaics, the fingerprints of the planet's first engineers. 8. A planet that remembers. Oxygen did more than change color and air. It altered the very rocks themselves. Minerals that could never exist before, like hematite and magnetite, appeared for the first time. The crust hardened, new mountains formed. Inside these stones, geologists today can still read the story of that transformation in isotopes and crystal scars. The earth remembers every breath it has ever taken. 9. The gift and the curse. With oxygen came energy. Cells that survived learned to use it, to harvest far more power from their food than ever before. This opened the door to complexity, larger cells, more intricate structures, cooperation. But oxygen is a double-edged element. It fuels life, yes, but it also corrodes, burns, breaks. Even today, every breath we take carries the seeds of aging, oxidation slowly wearing us down. The first breath of the planet was both creation and compromise. 10. The calm after. As the snow melted and the skies brightened, Earth entered a long era of relative peace. Continents drifted lazily, volcanoes slept more often than they screamed. The air was thin but stable, and the seas gleamed under a clear sky. In that stability, life found new ways to experiment. Cells merged, forming partnerships. Some learned to enclose their DNA, becoming the first eukaryotes, the ancestors of every plant, animal, and human to come. It was the dawn of complexity, born from a storm of gas and ice. The earth had taken its first breath. It had survived the freeze. And in doing so, it had set the stage for everything that would follow, for forests and oceans, for eyes and wings, for the quiet moment you sit in now. The next part of our journey will follow this growing heartbeat, the slow blossoming of life into shapes and senses, and the planet's restless dance through new ages of fire and frost. For now, breathe with the world that first learned how. You are still part of that breath. The world had thawed. After eons locked in white silence, the great ice sheets retreated, whispering back into the sea. The earth drew a slow breath, its second great exhalation, and sunlight, long muted, returned to the water's skin. From that melting silence came color. The planet that had been gray and silver turned green. 1. The Emerald Seas. The first light to touch the ocean in 10 million years was soft and golden. Within days, perhaps weeks, microbes awoke from their icy sleep. Cyanobacteria spread like spilled paint, staining the shallows turquoise and jade. From orbit, had anyone been watching, Earth would have shimmered anew, blue oceans veined with green, white cloud bands curling around continents of raw, volcanic red. It was the beginning of a living surface, an ocean breathing in rhythm with the sky. 2. The birth of supercontinents. Beneath those seas, the planet's crust moved in slow, grinding patience. Tectonic plates drifted, collided, and fused. Islands merged into vast masses of stone. Geologists call the first of these Columbia or Nuna, a supercontinent that rose around 2 billion years ago. Its mountains were low, its air heavy with carbon dioxide, but it was land, a new domain for weather, for erosion, for rivers that carved stories into stone. Every collision built new peaks, and every storm tore them down. This quiet duel between uplift and rain began the endless cycle that still sculpts our world. 3. Rain on stone. Imagine those first rains falling on naked granite. No moss, no soil, only mineral gleam. Each drop dissolved traces of rock, carrying calcium and phosphorus into the sea. Those elements, born of mountains, became food for life. In this way, the continents fed the oceans. And in return, the oceans began to shape the continents, weathering them, cooling them, softening their edges. It was the first partnership between land and life. 4. The slow alchemy of air. With green seas thriving, oxygen now lingered not just in water but in air. Lightning, sunlight, and dust conspired to build new gases, ozone thickening, methane thinning. The sky, once copper, deepened into the pale blue we know. Clouds grew higher, whiter. For the first time, the planets saw true daylight. But brightness brought heat. Rain fell harder, rivers ran faster, and weather began to shape climate. Earth was learning seasons. 5. The Great Partnership. Life itself was changing. Cells that once floated alone began to cooperate. Some joined in colonies, others learned to share labor, one storing energy, another moving, another guarding. Inside certain cells, tiny bacteria took refuge, offering their hosts energy in exchange for shelter. They became mitochondria, the powerhouses of complex life. It was one of the greatest partnerships in history, invisible yet eternal. Through this union, a new kind of cell emerged, complex, flexible, resilient. The eukaryote, ancestor of every plant, every animal, every human. 6. The Quiet World. For nearly 1 billion years, the Earth existed in quiet equilibrium. Oceans teemed with microscopic life, but to the naked eye, the world would have seemed still. No forests yet, no creatures stirring on land, only mats of green clinging to shorelines, tides whispering over them. Yet beneath that apparent stillness, evolution was busy. Genetic experiments unfolded in silence, new metabolisms, new defenses, tiny dramas repeated 1 trillion times a day. The stage was being prepared for complexity. 7. The Tapestry of Color. As oxygen filled the air, pigments evolved to capture and protect against sunlight. Red, brown, violet, colors unknown before shimmered in shallow seas. Coral-like colonies built mineral skeletons, weaving reefs of lime and iron. The once monochrome world was now a slow-moving kaleidoscope. The ocean's surface glittered, the seabed grew gardens of microbial domes. If you were there, the light would have seemed otherworldly, green beneath, gold above, all in slow motion. 8. The conversation of stone and sky. As life altered the air altered the stone. Rain mixed with oxygen and carbon dioxide to form weak acids, carving valleys, freeing more nutrients. Those minerals washed into the sea, feeding more microbes, creating more oxygen. It was a feedback loop, a quiet conversation between geology and biology. Each breath of wind, each wave of tide, each fallen drop carried part of that dialogue. The earth had become self-aware in the simplest way, it responded to its own living heartbeat. 9. When the world blinked. Then, as if to remind creation that balance is never forever, the planet shifted again. Supercontinents broke apart. Volcanoes returned, clouding the sky with ash. The sun's energy faltered slightly, and the warmth bled away. Red, brown, violet, colors unknown before shimmered in shallow seas. Coral-like colonies built mineral skeletons, weaving reefs of lime and iron. The once monochrome world was now a slow-moving kaleidoscope. The ocean's surface glittered, the seabed grew gardens of microbial domes. If you were there, the light would have seemed otherworldly, green beneath, gold above, all in slow motion. 8. The conversation of stone and sky. As life altered the air altered the stone. Rain mixed with oxygen and carbon dioxide to form weak acids, carving valleys, freeing more nutrients. Those minerals washed into the sea, feeding more microbes, creating more oxygen. It was a feedback loop, a quiet conversation between geology and biology. Each breath of wind, each wave of the planet had turned from ice to emerald, from silence to song. Its air was breathable, its seas alive, its continents ancient and proud. The next chapter would bring motion, creatures that crawled, swam, and felt. But for now, the world rests in its green calm, the heartbeat of oxygen steady beneath endless clouds. Breathe with it. You are made of this story. The green world had ripened. For nearly 1 billion years, the seas whispered quietly, filled with single-celled life. Now, the calm was breaking. The ocean was ready to imagine shapes. 1. The canvas beneath the waves. The sea of that time was warm and shallow, rich with minerals and sunlight. The seafloor shimmered with colonies of microbes, mats that breathed and grew. Each tide wrote new patterns across them, each storm rearranged their delicate art. From those endless repetitions came the raw material for something new, cells beginning to specialize, tiny communities learning how to work together. 2. The Ediacaran Dream. Around 600 million years ago, strange beings appeared in the sediment. They left soft impressions, fronds, discs, ribbons, spirals. We call them the Ediacaran organisms, though even now we are unsure what they truly were. Some looked like leaves anchored to the sea floor, others like quilted pillows, drifting gently in the current. They had no eyes, no mouths, no bones, just tissues, patterns, the beginnings of form. It was life painting with curves for the first time. 3. The breath of oxygen deepens. By now, oxygen had filled not only the skies but the depths. The sea was no longer suffocating. It shimmered with possibility. Higher oxygen meant new ways to live, to move, to grow large, to build structure. The planet's lungs were open wide, and life inhaled. 4. The nervous spark. Movement required awareness, and awareness required connection. Tiny filaments inside certain creatures began to carry signals, electrical whispers that coordinated motion. These were the earliest nerves, the first communication systems of the animal world. In time, they would become brains. But here, they were just ripples of intention, like thought learning to swim. 5. The ocean turns into a stage. Shallow continental shelves became theaters of light. Soft-bodied creatures glided across the mud, leaving trails that hardened into fossils. Some anchored to the seabed, gathering nutrients from the current. Others floated free, sails of living tissue catching sunlight. The seas grew crowded, not yet with predators and prey, but with forms experimenting in silence. It was a world of drifting gardens. 6. The Great Snow returns. Then, without warning, the warmth faltered again. Around 580 million years ago, the ice crept from the poles. Glaciers ground across the continents, and much of the ocean froze. Yet this Marinoan glaciation, perhaps the last global ice age of such scale, did not end life. It sculpted it. Beneath the frozen skin, ecosystems persisted, adapting to cold, conserving energy, waiting for the melt. When the ice finally receded, evolution leapt forward, as though pent-up imagination had been released. 7. Skeletons of the future. The new ocean chemistry favored minerals like calcium and silica. Organisms learned to use them, building shells, spines, and armor. The age of soft forms was ending. The first skeletons marked a profound change: protection, structure, and the possibility of movement powered by muscle. The blueprint for every future creature was being drawn in those translucent shells. 8. The Cambrian explosion. And then, suddenly, in geological terms, the sea bloomed with diversity. Within a few tens of millions of years, life radiated into every niche. This was the Cambrian explosion, about 541 million years ago. The fossil record ignites here like a constellation coming into view. Trilobites scuttled across the seabed. Worms tunneled through sediment. Creatures with eyes glimpsed light and shadow for the first time. Predation was born, and with it, motion, defense, fear, and the earliest rhythms of pursuit. 9. Eyes of light. The invention of the eye changed everything. No longer was existence only touch and chemistry, it was vision. With sight came direction, purpose, beauty. The oceans turned into living kaleidoscopes, color against color, light against darkness. Every glimmer could mean life or death. Evolution accelerated, driven by the ancient chase of hunter and prey. 10. The music of motion. Fins fluttered. Bodies undulated. Muscles coiled and released in perfect cadence. The seas that had once been silent now thrummed with the soft percussion of movement. For the first time, life danced. The earth had taught its children how to move with grace. And in that movement lay everything that would follow: journeys, migrations, curiosity itself. The ocean was alive with color, motion, and light. The age of creatures had begun. Soon, they would test new realms: rock, shore, air, but for now, they swam beneath waves older than memory. Rest here for a moment. Listen to the rhythm of those ancient tides, the same rhythm that still beats in your veins. The sea had been life's cradle for nearly 4 billion years. It taught the planet how to breathe, how to move, how to see. But every cradle must open someday. And now, the edge of the ocean shimmered with possibility. 1. The call of the shore. The Cambrian world had rippled with color and motion. Trilobites scuttled, jelly-soft creatures drifted like lanterns, and predators hunted with crystalline eyes. Yet along the shallows, sunlight touched more than water. It warmed sand, stone, and the thin films of algae that clung to them. Here, at the boundary between worlds, chemistry met curiosity. Life began to wonder what lay beyond the tide. 2. The Garden of Maths. The first pioneers were not animals at all but colonies of cyanobacteria and simple algae. They formed dark, slippery carpets across the damp rock. With every high tide they drank seawater, with every low tide they endured the sun. Their mats trapped dust, built layers, and slowly created the first soils. They were the gardeners of land before land truly lived. 3. Armor and air. In the Devonian seas, about 420 million years ago, fish ruled. Some wore armor of bone, others slender scales that shimmered like metal in the light. Among them were creatures with fins strong enough to push against the seafloor, to rest in the shallows where predators were few and oxygen richer. Those fins, inch by inch, grew more muscular. Inside, bones rearranged themselves in the pattern that would one day hold wrists and fingers. Evolution was sketching blueprints for walking. 4. The first breath of air. Air is harsher than water, it dries and burns. But it holds more oxygen, more promise. Some fish learned to gulp it when the tides retreated or ponds shrank. Their gills collapsed, but small sacs within their bodies, primitive lungs, swelled with air. These were the first vertebrates to breathe sky. Their descendants would become amphibians, reptiles, birds, and mammals. Every breath you take is a faint echo of that ancient gasp. 5. The green frontier. Meanwhile, plants were preparing the way. From algae in tidal pools arose the first moss-like pioneers, creeping onto damp rock. They carried water inside fragile cells, learning to stand, to capture sunlight above the surface. Soon they developed tubes to move that water, roots to anchor, leaves to drink light. The world's first forests were still centuries of millennia away, but the green march had begun. The smell of earth, the scent of rain on soil, was being invented. 6. Insects in the air. Tiny arthropods, cousins of crabs and trilobites, followed the plants ashore. They crawled through moss and mud, feeding on decaying mats, breathing through tubes along their sides. When oxygen rose to levels higher than ever before, some of these creatures grew large. Millipedes thicker than a man's arm, dragonflies with wings like dinner plates. The air itself had become fertile ground. Each wing beat whispered the same message: the planet belongs to those who dare to cross boundaries. 7. The Age of Amphibians. In warm lagoons at the edges of continents, lobe-finned fish lifted themselves onto muddy banks. They hauled their bodies forward, gasping, sliding, leaving marks that hardened into fossils, the first footprints on land. Over generations, their descendants spent more time above the tide. They grew stronger limbs, stiffer spines, lungs that could fill fully. They became the earliest amphibians, travelers between worlds. Their calls would someday echo through forests that did not yet exist. 8. The breath of forests. Plants flourished, branching higher, weaving roots that broke stone into soil. As greenery spread, the air changed again. Oxygen climbed, carbon fell, and the sky brightened. Forests of giant ferns and horsetails covered valleys. Their shadows cooled the ground, their roots drew rivers into patterns. The sound of wind through leaves joined the planet's growing music. Earth had found its voice. 9. The cycle of renewal. With plants came decay, and with decay came nutrients, food for the next generation. Fungi learned to break down fallen stems, insects to feed on rot, amphibians to hunt the insects. It was the first closed loop, a self-sustaining web where every death nourished new life. The land was no longer barren, it pulsed. 10. The Great Experiments. Some amphibians lingered near the water, others ventured deeper inland. Each step demanded innovation, tougher skin, stronger hearts, new ways to reproduce without returning to the sea. Evolution obliged. From these quiet experiments would arise reptiles with shelled eggs, creatures that could carry the ocean inside them wherever they went. The conquest of land was complete in principle, though the world still trembled with change. The earth had opened a new chapter. Ocean still ruled, but now rivers sang through forests and feet pressed into soil. The sky, once empty, glittered with wings. Life had climbed from cradle to continent. And in doing so, it began to shape not only the planet, but time itself, seasons, cycles, migrations, memory. Breathe softly, this is where your own story's foundation lies. In the first footprint left upon wet sand, half water, half dream. The earth was green now. Forests stretched across continents that once lay bare, their roots clinging to stone like fingers of patience. Rivers wound between towering ferns and trees whose trunks reached 30 meters high. It was the Carboniferous period, a time when the world breathed deeper than ever before. A time when the air itself was rich and sweet, heavy with oxygen and the scent of endless rain. 1. The forests of breath. Imagine walking through those forests. The air would feel thick, almost drinkable, laced with the perfume of damp soil and giant leaves. Sunlight barely reached the ground, filtering through a canopy of moss and fronds. Water dripped constantly from the trees, rain recycling through a sky that never stayed dry for long. These forests were not like ours. There were no flowering plants yet, no bees or blossoms, no birdsong. Only ferns, club mosses, and towering horsetails, green cathedrals built from repetition and light. Every surface was alive. Even the bark breathed. 2. The insects of the air. Above the steaming undergrowth, wings glittered. Insects had discovered the sky and filled it with motion. Dragonflies the size of hawks darted between trees, their gossamer wings whispering in the heavy air. Millipedes as long as small cars coiled through leaf litter. Spiders, though still primitive, stretched their first delicate webs between mossy stems. The high oxygen content of the atmosphere allowed these creatures to grow enormous. Every breath was an abundance. The air was their ocean, and they were its swimmers. 3. The Age of Amphibians. In the dark pools beneath the trees, amphibians reigned. Their bodies, half fish, half reptile, glistened like polished stone. Some had flattened heads and wide mouths to gulp prey from the surface, others crept through roots and reeds, their lungs pulsing like wet sails. These creatures, ancestors of frogs, salamanders, and countless lost lineages, ruled the swamps as confidently as fish ruled the sea. But change was stirring in the air. Land was calling again, and this time, some would not return to the water. 4. The egg that changed the world. It began, as many revolutions do, quietly. Some amphibians laid eggs that could survive longer outside water, protected by membranes and thicker shells. Those tiny innovations freed their young from the tyranny of the tide. From those eggs hatched the first reptiles, creatures no longer bound to ponds or marshes, able to live entirely on land. With them came new possibilities, drier habitats, farther journeys, new forms of survival. It was the birth of independence. 5. Fire and air. The forests that had flourished for millions of years now faced their own growing pains. With oxygen at nearly 35%, far higher than today, fire became both creator and destroyer. Lightning storms could ignite vast infernos, clearing space for new growth but leaving behind ghostly landscapes of ash. Yet even in destruction, life adapted. Some plants evolved thicker bark, others released spores only after burning, ensuring rebirth after the flames. The rhythm of fire entered Earth's story, a reminder that renewal often comes dressed as loss. 6. The continental dance. Meanwhile, deep below the roots, the planet's crust continued its slow, silent choreography. Continents drifted closer, gathering toward a single landmass, Pangaea. As they collided, mountain ranges rose, spines of stone that split the sky. The planet's heartbeat quickened, earthquakes rippled through valleys, volcanoes seeded the air with ash and minerals. The Earth was growing restless again, preparing for another transformation. 7. Shadows of the future. With the rise of reptiles came variety. Some remained small and nimble, feeding on insects. Others grew thick-skinned and slow, grazing on ferns. A few evolved sharp teeth and claws, beginning the long legacy of predators that would one day dominate the planet. Their limbs were strong, their lungs powerful, their hearts divided for efficiency. They could travel farther, live longer, survive the dry seasons that would have doomed amphibians. In their scaled bodies lay the blueprint for the giants to come. 8. The fall of the great forests. As Pangaea formed, climates shifted. What had once been swamp became desert. Rivers dried, forests fell. The humid cradle that had birthed insects and amphibians began to fade into history. Coal seams, what we now burn for light and heat, were born here, formed from the compressed remains of those ancient trees. Every spark of fire today is a whisper from the Carboniferous forest. But for life, this ending was not death, it was transformation. Those who adapted to the dryness would inherit the earth. 9. The rise of reptiles. By the late Carboniferous and early Permian periods, reptiles ruled the land. They basked in the sun on rocky plains, their scales glinting like bronze. Some grew massive, others darted like lizards among roots. Their eggs hardened, their skin thickened, their lungs deepened. They no longer needed water to survive. They had become masters of air and stone. For the first time, the planet's great stage belonged to land animals. 10. The calm before the fire. The world was settling into a fragile balance. Forests still covered valleys, deserts stretched across interiors, and reptiles basked in abundance. But deep in the Earth's mantle, pressures were building. The landmass of Pangaea was not yet content, its joining would soon tear open seams of fire. In the distant future, this restlessness would unleash the greatest extinction the planet had ever seen. But for now, Earth was vibrant, a paradise of green and gold, filled with the hum of insects and the slow breath of giants. This was the age of giants, when the land itself seemed alive. An age of forests that touched the sky, of dragonflies like eagles, of the first reptiles dreaming beneath endless rain. The earth, in its long patience, had created wonder upon wonder. Life had found air, warmth, and form. But the story was not finished. Soon, the calm would shatter, and from the ashes of that loss, new creatures would rise, stronger, stranger, and destined to inherit the continents. Sleep now, within the breath of those forgotten forests. They are still with you, in every tree, in every lungful of air. There are moments in the story of Earth when life seems unstoppable, when forests stretch to the horizon and the air hums with wings. But time is never still, and creation's rhythm has always held another note, destruction. 250 million years ago, the planet took a deep, burning breath. What followed would erase almost everything that lived. 1. The age before the fire. Before the cataclysm, Earth was content. Reptiles ruled the land. Forests of conifers and ferns covered vast plains. Insects swarmed, amphibians lingered, and the seas brimmed with strange fish and shelled creatures. This was the Permian period, a time of stability, of deserts and deltas, of dry wind and endless sunlight. But beneath the crust, something was stirring. Magma moved like a sleeping heartbeat, gathering heat beneath the supercontinent of Pangaea. The planet was preparing a storm of its own making. 2. The sky turns to ash. Then, without warning in the measure of life, volcanoes split the land. It began in what is now Siberia, a scar that would burn for 1,000,000 years. Rivers of lava flooded plains, releasing clouds of carbon dioxide, sulfur, and ash that darkened the sun. The sky grew dim. Rain turned acidic. The oceans warmed, then suffocated. It was the Siberian Traps eruption, one of the largest volcanic events in the history of the planet, and it changed everything. 3. The Great Dying. Within a few million years, nearly 90% of all species vanished. Forests collapsed. Reefs dissolved. Insects that had ruled the air for hundreds of millions of years disappeared. Only a few small creatures endured, burrowers in the soil, scavengers in the dark, survivors of heat and poison. Scientists call it the Permian-Triassic extinction, but it is known more simply, more truthfully, as the Great Dying. Never before, and not since, has life come so close to ending. 4. The Silent Earth. For a time, the planet went quiet. The air grew thin. Oceans turned green with decay. Continents baked under a red sun. There were no songs of insects, no rustling leaves. The forests were gone. The wind carried only dust. If you could stand there, the silence would feel endless, a world stripped bare, still trembling from its own fire. And yet, even in that silence, seeds of resilience remained. 5. The Survivors. Some creatures endured by hiding. Burrowing reptiles sheltered in cool earth. Amphibians lingered in rare, shaded waters. Tiny marine invertebrates clung to vents on the ocean floor, feeding on the minerals of the planet's breath. One small group of reptiles, the archosaurs, managed to adapt, their lungs and hearts efficient enough to survive the thin air. They would become the ancestors of crocodiles, birds, and dinosaurs. From the ashes of extinction, a new lineage waited to rise. 6. The Slow Healing. When the eruptions finally ceased, the air began to clear. Rain fell again, hesitant at first, then steady. Oceans cooled, the sky turned blue. New forests grew, sparse and strange, of hardy ferns and conifers. The earth exhaled, weakly at first, then stronger. The planet had survived its own fever. And life, patient as always, began to rebuild. 7. The Dawn After. With the new dawn came opportunity. The continents, now fused as Pangaea, stretched from pole to pole, vast and varied. Deserts covered interiors, lush coasts rimmed the edges. Here, in the warmth of a reborn world, reptiles diversified once more. Some grew large and slow, feeding on the fresh greenery. Others grew swift and lean, their jaws and claws honed by hunger. The age of dinosaurs was beginning to whisper. 8. The Ocean's Return. Beneath the waves, the oceans healed too. Coral reefs reappeared, built by new species of tiny architects. Ammonites, coiled, shell-bearing relatives of squid, spiraled through the blue depths. Fish evolved new fins and jaws, exploring every corner of the sea. From desolation, abundance returned. It is one of the oldest lessons of this planet, even in loss, life keeps designing. 9. The Lesson of the Fire. The Great Dying reshaped not just species, but the rules of survival. Creatures learned to breathe more efficiently, to reproduce faster, to endure drought and heat. The ecosystems that followed were more complex, more resilient. It was as though Earth had tested itself, reforged through suffering into something stronger. The fire that nearly ended life had, in its own cruel way, prepared it for the future. 10. The promise in the ash. In time, the forests returned, smaller at first, then taller. Rivers flowed again, carving paths through young stone. Rain smelled of soil, not sulfur. Tiny lizards sunned themselves on rocks. Insects buzzed once more. In the distance, herds of new reptiles grazed under the rising sun. The world, scarred and reborn, had entered the Triassic period, the threshold of a new empire. From fire and shadow, the stage was set for life's next great act. And in the quiet after the storm, the earth turned slowly beneath a gentle sky, ready to dream again. The great dying had ended. What came next would be the reign of giants, a world of thunder and grace, where life would grow to sizes never seen before. But for now, the earth rests, alive, scarred, and breathing once again. The fire had faded. The world, once silent, began again to hum. From ash and shadow, life rose into sunlight, cautious, graceful, curious. It was a new chapter, and the earth was ready for grandeur. This was the Mesozoic era, the age of renewal, the age of reptiles, the reign of giants. 1. The world reawakens. The Triassic dawn broke upon a world still warm from its own rebirth. The land stretched as one, the supercontinent Pangaea, its red deserts ringed by blue oceans. Rivers wound through canyons of stone. Ferns and conifers sprouted wherever water lingered. Above, the air shimmered with heat. Clouds drifted lazily, and rain fell only in bursts, but each drop that touched the earth brought green to life again. It was a world testing its pulse after sleep. 2. The new pioneers. In this reborn landscape, reptiles flourished. They took shapes never seen before, tall, long-limbed, upright. Some grazed among the ferns, others hunted gently through the brush. Among them were the early dinosaurs, small at first, their footsteps light across the soil. They were not yet the titans of story, only clever survivors, quick, warm-blooded, alive to change. Their strength lay in adaptability, and that gift would soon carry them to greatness. 3. Oceans of light. While land healed, the oceans blossomed anew. Coral reefs were formed, filled with coiled ammonites and graceful marine reptiles gliding like underwater kites. Sunlight filtered down through clear water, painting ripples of gold upon the seafloor. Each current carried memory, traces of the world that had burned and the world that had been reborn. Fish grew sleek and fast, their scales catching the glimmer of the returning sun. It was life's promise fulfilled, even after endings, beauty always returns. 4. The age of balance. By the middle of the Triassic, the planet had found its rhythm again. Volcanoes quieted, climates softened, rain returned. Forests grew thick and tall, covering valleys with green velvet. For the first time in hundreds of millions of years, the earth was calm. This peace became the cradle of evolution, a stillness in which diversity could flourish. Crocodile ancestors prowled rivers, burly turtles glided between lily paths. Insects danced above mossy pools. And from these tranquil scenes, a dynasty began. 5. The giants rise. Over time, the small, bird-hipped dinosaurs of the Triassic gave way to larger forms. Their legs lengthened, their necks stretched toward the treetops, and their hearts grew mighty enough to lift blood to unimaginable heights. By the Jurassic period, the earth was alive with giants. Sauropods, creatures longer than buses and taller than houses, wandered through fern valleys. Their movements were slow, deliberate, almost meditative. When they walked, the ground itself seemed to breathe. Above them, trees swayed, shedding clouds of pollen that drifted like golden dust in the sun. It was a planet made of rhythm and weight, of quiet enormity. 6. Wings of light. Not all life remained bound to the earth. From the lineage of small, curious reptiles came the first to master the air, the pterosaurs. Their wings, stretched thin as silk over slender bones, caught the breeze along cliffs and coastlines. They glided in silence, feeding on fish and insects, their shadows sweeping across sand and water. And in their flight, the sky, once only the realm of clouds, became a living place. Later, some small feathered creatures would rise from the same lineage, giving birth to the first birds. Feathers, once warmth and color, became instruments of freedom. The earth had learned to fly. 7. Forests of wonder. The planet grew lush again. Conifers towered, cycads and ginkgo trees unfurled fan-shaped leaves. In the shade, small mammals darted, quiet and unseen, feeding on seeds and insects. They were nocturnal, modest, survivors in a world ruled by colossi. Evenings would fall in golden silence, the air rich with the smell of resin and rain. The first true night forests had arrived, alive with sound, yet soft and still enough to sleep beneath. It was a paradise of balance, of growth without haste. 8. The sea giants. In the oceans, life found new forms of grace. Ichthyosaurs, shaped like dolphins, sliced through the waves with effortless beauty. Plesiosaurs drifted slowly, their long necks weaving through schools of shimmering fish. The reefs, reborn after the great dying, glowed with life, coral gardens, coiled shells, drifting jellyfish like living lanterns. The sea had healed, and with it came peace. From above, the earth was a mosaic of blues and greens, a living jewel spinning quietly beneath an ancient sun. 9. The Song of Rain. For nearly 150 million years, the dinosaurs flourished. The continents drifted apart, oceans widened, and weather patterns shifted. But through it all, rain remained the same, the heartbeat of life, falling from clouds, rising again as mist. That rain fed forests, filled lakes, carved valleys. It washed away ash, nourished roots, and stitched together the rhythm of life that endures even now. In every drop today lies the memory of those ancient storms. 10. The Golden Age. This was Earth at its most balanced, a symphony of air, water, and life. No single creature ruled, yet harmony reigned. Dinosaurs in all forms, small, large, swift, and gentle, filled the planet with movement and sound. They were not monsters, but part of a delicate order, gardeners of ecosystems, carriers of evolution's story. For more than 100 million years, they walked under stars that shone as they do tonight. And though their era would one day end, their legacy would never truly fade. Every bird that sings in the morning, every feather that drifts on the wind, is a quiet remembrance of their reign. The Age of Giants was not just an age of strength, it was an age of patience, of cooperation, of balance between sky and stone. But even balance is only a pause between changes. In the next chapter, shadows will fall again, and from them, the world will turn toward something familiar, a landscape of mammals, flowers, and the first hints of us. Until then, breathe in the ancient air. It once filled the lungs of giants. Every age has its twilight. Not sudden, not cruel, simply a slow dimming of light, a quiet hand turning the page of time. For over 100 million years, the world had been ruled by grace and enormity. Dinosaurs walked through forests of fern and pine. Seas shimmered with creatures of perfect design. The air was full of wings. But now, the sky itself was beginning to change. 1. The Age of Harmony. For millions of years, life thrived in a balance so complete it felt eternal. The continents, now drifting apart, gave rise to new climates, deserts in one land, rainforests in another. Rivers wound through fertile valleys, flowers, newly evolved, opened delicate faces to the sun. Yes, flowers. After ages of green, color had finally come. Bees and butterflies appeared, dancing through petals of crimson and gold. Their soft murmur joined the rhythm of the world, a hum of life that carried through the warm Cretaceous air. It was, for a time, paradise. 2. The world in bloom. Forests were alive with texture and fragrance. Magnolias and cycads shared space with ancient pines. The smell of resin mingled with the sweetness of pollen. Birds, the living descendants of dinosaurs, flitted through the branches, singing their first tentative songs. They had taken the gift of flight and turned it into art. Beneath them, herds of great herbivores grazed in peace, long-necked sauropods, crested hadrosaurs, armored stegosaurs. Their footsteps fell like slow drumbeats across the land. Predators watched from the shadows, but even they moved with patience. This was not yet a world of fear, but of rhythm. 3. Mammals in the shadows. Through this age of giants, small creatures scurried unseen. They were warm-blooded, furred, sharp-eyed, and clever. Mammals, still minor players in a drama too large for them, fed at night, nesting in roots and hollows, raising tiny young in hidden dens. Their world was the twilight, the hours when giants slept. But evolution was quietly preparing them for dawn. In those small hearts beat endurance, in their soft fur, warmth, in their habits, adaptability. They were built not for glory, but for survival. 4. The restless earth. Below the peace of the surface, the planet never stopped moving. Continents continued their slow drift. Volcanoes whispered along the seams of plates, spilling new land into the oceans. The air changed subtly, carbon rising and falling like breath. Seasons grew longer, storms more intense. Even paradise feels the pull of change. 5. The sky darkens. Somewhere in the outer reaches of the solar system, a wanderer approached, a fragment of stone and ice, following a path older than memory. It had traveled for eons through silence and distance, unaware that its course would cross that of a living world. When it entered the atmosphere, it came as a second sun, a streak of fire and brilliance across the Cretaceous sky. For a brief, impossible moment, the earth was brighter than day. And then, the light became shadow. 6. The long night. The impact came in what is now the Yucatan Peninsula. The earth trembled. Waves crossed oceans, dust filled the atmosphere. The sky grew dark, and the air cooled. But this story is not of violence, it is of endurance. For though the world slept under clouds of ash, life held its breath. Plants waited in roots and seeds. Small animals huddled underground or beneath water. And when the long night finally ended, the survivors emerged into a gentler world. 7. After the silence. The forests that grew back were different, thinner, younger, more open to light. The age of dinosaurs had passed into memory, but their legacy remained in every bird that rose into the morning sky. The mammals, once hidden, stepped into the warmth. They found empty valleys, unclaimed forests, and sunlight without shadow. The world belonged to them now. 8. The first dawn of mammals. At first, they were small, fox-sized hunters, shrew-like gatherers, tiny climbers in the trees. But they were curious, adaptable, and fertile. They spread across the continents, evolving into endless shapes: grazers, swimmers, gliders, runners. In them, the planet rediscovered variety, not through size this time, but through imagination. The mammals brought softness to the Earth's new age: fur against wind, heartbeat against stone. 9. The return of light. As sunlight returned to full strength, flowers and forests spread again. Bees resumed their patient work. Rivers found new paths through green hills. The earth, as it always does, healed. Where fire had fallen, new color grew. The age of giants had ended, but the age of wonder was only beginning. Evolution's melody had simply changed key. 10. A legacy of stars. Every extinction, every ending, has carried forward the same secret: life is not erased, it transforms. The dinosaurs had ruled for over 160 million years, and though they were gone, their descendants still sang in the morning light. The mammals, newly awake, would inherit that light, and one day, from their line, beings would arise who could look back and remember. Beings who would name the stars, trace their own origins in ancient stone, and whisper stories like this one into the quiet dark. We are those beings. And the earth, patient as always, still carries the memory of every step that brought us here. The long twilight had ended. Life had endured again. And in that endurance, the planet found its voice: soft, resilient, eternal. Next time, we will follow that voice into the age of mammals, a world of forests, mountains, migrations, and the slow unfolding of intelligence. For now, let the echo of that first morning linger. The light that warms your face is the same light that rose after the dinosaurs fell. The giants had fallen. The dust had settled. And in the hush that followed, the world began again. From the ashes of twilight came the age of renewal, the age of mammals, forests, and changing skies. A planet rediscovering balance, shaped now not by size, but by sensitivity. 1. A green rebirth. When sunlight returned to full strength, it touched a world reborn. Grasses began to spread across plains. Forests rose where ashes once lay. The air smelled clean, sharp with resin, warm with soil. Small animals stirred in the undergrowth: shrews, possums, fox-like hunters, creatures that could climb, swim, or dig. Their eyes, adapted to twilight, blinked open to a brighter age. The earth exhaled, and life filled the silence once more. 2. The world in motion. The continents drifted slowly apart, forming shapes that would become familiar. The Atlantic widened, the Indian plate began its long, patient push toward Asia, and mountains rose where oceans had once whispered. Rain fell upon new ranges, carving valleys and rivers. Monsoons gathered. Deserts bloomed and vanished again. The planet was not rebuilding, it was refining. It was sculpting the stage for every story to follow. 3. Forests of light. In this new age, flowering plants spread in endless variety. Colors no longer hid in the sea, they unfurled on land. Every meadow became a painting: violet and gold, scarlet and cream. Bees buzzed through the air, their rhythm the pulse of the world's renewal. Birds, descendants of the long-vanished giants, sang across the canopies, weaving sound into sunlight. Each petal, each hum, each flutter was a celebration of survival. 4. The rise of mammals. With the dinosaurs gone, the mammals expanded into every space. Some remained small, quick, and nocturnal. Others grew larger, exploring new forms: graceful grazers, tusk diggers, swift predators. The Eocene epoch, about 50 million years ago, was their dawn of diversity. Forests of palm and magnolia shaded herds of early horses no bigger than dogs. Tapered snouts sniffed the air where once reptiles had ruled. Life no longer measured greatness by height or armor, but by adaptability and care. 5. The gift of warmth. Mammals carried a secret advantage: warmth from within. While the air cooled and heated with the seasons, their bodies held steady, like hearths in a changing world. It allowed them to live almost anywhere: mountain, tundra, jungle, plain. They learned to nurture, to protect, to remember. Each heartbeat passed knowledge quietly from mother to offspring, a living thread through time. This is the rhythm you carry still. 6. The sky of wings. As mammals claimed the ground, birds claimed the air. They filled every niche: hunters on high winds, songbirds in forests, seabirds skimming silver waves. Feathers caught sunlight, refracting color that had never before existed on land. Iridescent blues, fiery reds, the shimmer of green against morning mist. The sky, once silent, had become a cathedral of flight. 7. The cooling earth. As the Eocene warmth faded, the planet began to cool. Polar ice formed again, small at first, then vast. Oceans withdrew, revealing new coastlines and fertile plains. The Oligocene epoch arrived with gentler light and longer shadows. Grasslands spread, and creatures learned to run. Speed replaced size as the currency of survival. Horses lengthened their legs, antelope and deer appeared, predators grew leaner, built for the chase. The world was learning motion anew. 8. The shifting air. The cooling brought rhythm. Winds sharpened, seasons strengthened. Spring returned each year like a promise, winter taught patience. Life adapted, layering fur, migrating with the sun, resting through snow. Every adaptation was a small poem in the language of endurance. In the quiet of frozen dawns and the shimmer of summer rain, the planet was writing verses only time could read. 9. Mountains and memory. Far away, the Indian plate collided with Asia. The earth folded upward, birthing the Himalayas, the roof of the world. That collision changed everything. It altered winds, shaped monsoons, cooled the planet further. The breath of those newborn mountains still moves through our seasons today. The land remembers its own making. 10. The quiet before the cold. By the Miocene epoch, roughly 20 million years ago, the earth looked almost as it does now. Forests spread across Europe and North America, savannas rolled through Africa. Elephants with straight tusks roamed in herds, whales sang in deep oceans, apes swung gently through trees thick with fruit. It was a tranquil time, a pause before the next great change. Already, glaciers whispered at the poles, a hint of the ice ages to come. But for now, the earth rested in green light and endless song. The age of mammals had come, an age of gentleness, of care, of minds beginning to open to thought and memory. The world had cooled but grown wiser. The seeds of consciousness had been planted. In our next chapter, we will walk into the age of ice and stone, where rivers froze, continents shifted once more, and ancient humans began to dream beneath the stars. For now, let the sound of wind and distant waves carry you through the long calm between epochs. You are listening to the heartbeat of a planet at peace. When the long green age began to fade, the air grew thin and cool. Forests withdrew toward the equator, and grasses spread across the continents like soft fur. The earth was drawing a deep, patient breath, preparing to dream in white. 1. The turning of the sun. For reasons written in the dance of the planets, the Earth's orbit wobbled, its tilt shifted, and the balance of sunlight changed. Winters lengthened, summers weakened. Snow that fell at the poles no longer melted. Layer by layer, it built into sheets of crystal miles thick, the beginning of the ice ages. The world cooled slowly, gently, almost kindly at first. Mountains glittered, seas lowered, and winds began their long song across the plains. 2. The sculptor of continents. Ice is not silence, it is movement slowed beyond sight. Glaciers crept southward, grinding valleys into crescents, carving lakes that would one day cradle forests and towns. Every river, every coastline was shaped by that patient hand. Beneath the weight of ice, the crust sank. When it melted, the land rose again, breathing like a sleeping giant. The earth was reshaping itself, cold against the warmth of its own core. 3. Life in the cold. Even in frost, life found ways. Woolly grasses bent but did not break. Herds of mammoths, musk oxen, and reindeer roamed in long migrations, following the rhythm of thaw and snow. Wolves learned endurance, bears learned sleep. Every creature adjusted its heartbeat to the heartbeat of the ice. And in the temperate refuges between the glaciers, small primates watched, learned, and waited. 4. Fire in the dark. Among those watchers, one lineage began to change. Hands grew deft, minds widened. They learned that friction could birth warmth, that a spark could hold back night. With fire, humankind's first invention of light, the cold became teacher instead of enemy. Around the flames, stories were born, not in words at first, but in gestures, rhythms, and the comfort of shared glow. The human journey had begun. 5. The pulse of migration. As the ice waxed and waned, seas rose and fell, exposing land bridges between continents. People followed herds, rivers, stars. Each migration carried memories and tools, stone flakes, bone needles, carved talismans. They crossed from Africa into Asia, from Asia into Europe, from Siberia into the Americas. Every footstep was a note in the song of expansion that still echoes in our veins. 6. The voice of stone. The glaciers left gifts behind, flint, obsidian, and crystal, sharp and bright. Humans learned to shape them into blades and spears, instruments of survival and art. Caves became galleries of memory, bison, horses, and handprints painted in red ochre and charcoal. Each mark said the same thing: I was here, I saw this, I remember. The earth was learning to see itself through human eyes. 7. The rhythm of thaw. Between glacial ages came warmer breaths, interludes of green. Forests returned, rivers flooded, birds filled the air with song. Then, slowly, the cold would advance again, erasing and rewriting. This rhythm repeated for 2.5 million years, a long heartbeat of freeze and thaw. It shaped not only land but mind, patience, foresight, imagination. To live through ice, one must dream of spring. 8. The taming of flame. Humans learned to keep their fires alive through storm and snow, to carry embers wrapped in moss, to guard them like treasure. They built hearths of stone, circles of warmth amid endless white. There, language deepened, music was born, comfort became culture. Each flicker of flame mirrored the sun they missed. Each spark was defiance and faith combined. 9. When the ice began to fade. About 12,000 years ago, the last great glaciers began to retreat. Rivers ran free again, valleys filled with wildflowers. The world, once gray and silver, turned blue and green. Mammoths dwindled, forests surged, and people followed the melt, settling where water and warmth returned. They planted seeds, tamed animals, built shelters of wood and clay. Civilization was stirring beneath the thaw. 10. The memory of ice. Even now, the planet remembers. In mountain caps, in deep-sea ice, in the pattern of seasons and tides, the legacy of that cold age endures. It taught balance, fire against frost, adaptation against change. And within us, it left echoes, the love of warmth, the pull toward light, the instinct to gather when storms arrive. We are the children of ice and fire both. The earth had cooled, then warmed again. In that long cycle, humankind had found its place, a species of memory and curiosity, able to survive both darkness and dawn. Next, we will follow the rise of early civilizations, the shaping of rivers and cities, and the first sparks of thought that reached for the stars. For now, rest beneath the quiet breath of the ice. The same wind that once carved mountains still moves outside your window tonight. When the last ice retreated, the world opened like a page turned in sunlight. Across green valleys and widening plains, rivers began to speak again. They carved their paths through memory, carrying silt, seed, and story. Human hands, once wanderers, began to listen. 1. The first rivers. The rivers were teachers. The Tigris and Euphrates in the warm lands of Mesopotamia. The Nile winding like a silver thread through desert stone. The Indus, the Yellow River, the Yangtze. Each a patient guide in the art of permanence. Here people learned the rhythm of seasons. The rise and retreat of floodwaters, the promise of grain, the hush of harvest. With every return of spring, villages became towns. The nomad began to dream of home. 2. Earth and seed. The first fields were small, patches of soil tilled by hand. Grains gathered and guarded. Water diverted through channels cut by stone. Farming was a form of faith. Every seed was a story told to the ground. Grow, so that we may remain. From these gardens of trust rose granaries, pottery. Walls to keep the wind, hearths to keep the flame. The earth fed her children, and in gratitude they stayed. 3. Voices of clay. Along the riverbanks, a new miracle appeared, writing. Simple marks pressed into soft clay. Lists of grain, names of traders, offerings to unseen gods. At first it was record, soon it became memory. And memory became culture. From these signs grew songs and laws. Histories and prayers, the beginning of story itself. The whisper of civilization had begun. 4. Cities of light. From villages rose cities, Ur and Uruk, Memphis and Thebes. Harappa, Mohenjo-Daro, and the cities of the Yellow River Plain. They gleamed beside their waters, reflections rippling under the sun. Stone met sky in the first temples. Mud brick turned to monument. Human vision stretched upward, seeking the heavens that had always watched from above. Every tower was a question. Every garden, an answer. 5. The gift of trade. Rivers carried more than water. They bore obsidian and copper, lapis and spice. Ideas flowing as freely as goods. Boats glided silently between harbors. Their sails like wings catching the breath of dawn. The world was no longer separate valleys, it was a web of paths. Threads of curiosity weaving continents together. 6. Sky and symbol. At night, farmers and priests lifted their eyes to the same constellations. They saw order in the chaos of stars. And from that order, they made calendars, temples, and tales. Time itself became something people could name, measure, and celebrate. Days for planting. Days for thanks. Days for silence. Even now, the pulse of your own year follows their ancient rhythm. 7. The Age of Bronze. Fire, once a friend against cold, became a forge. Copper met tin, and the world entered the Bronze Age. Tools grew stronger, art grew finer. Warriors and sculptors shared the same flame. But amid the clang of metal, something gentler persisted. Music, mathematics, poetry. Human hands learned to create beauty not just to survive, but to remember. 8. The rivers remember. Each civilization rose from flood and silt. And when their empires faded, the rivers kept flowing. The Nile still reflects the same moon that shone on pharaohs. The Euphrates still hums beneath stars once counted by Sumerians. Water forgets nothing, it carries whispers of every shore. Stand beside any river today, and you stand where humanity first began to dream. 9. The weavers of time. As centuries passed, people carried the gifts of river life inland. Seeds, myths, and the skill to build with purpose. Mountains were crossed, deserts traversed. Caravans traced invisible lines that would one day become roads. The hum of civilization spread like pollen on the wind. Each journey was a continuation of the same story. To seek balance between wandering and belonging. 10. The quiet legacy. The rivers taught us patience. They taught us that strength can flow softly. That change can carve canyons without violence. From their lesson came everything. Our cities, our calendars, our faith in renewal. And when you listen closely to running water, you still hear them speaking in the oldest language on earth. The sound of persistence. The music of return. The age of rivers had given humanity a home, a name, and memory. But beyond those gentle deltas lay mountains of challenge. Oceans to cross, and the slow awakening of reason and art. In our next chapter, we will drift toward the age of empires and ideas. When thought itself became a force as powerful as any flood. For now, let the river's murmur be your lullaby. It is the same rhythm that once guided the first hands to build, the first hearts to hope. The rivers had given rise to memory. From their banks, humanity learned to build, to write, to dream in stone. But now, people began to dream of something greater still. Of order, of knowledge, of understanding the sky itself. This was the age of empires and ideas. A time when thought took shape like cities rising from the mist. 1. The light of order. In Mesopotamia, kings and scribes inscribed laws into clay. Symbols of fairness, of stability, of promise. Civilization was no longer a moment, it was a system. A network of lives bound by belief in reason. From the sands of Babylon to the temples of Thebes, human beings learned to think not only of survival, but of meaning. Every inscription, every brick laid, was a gesture toward eternity. 2. The builders of stone and sky. Across the ancient world, monuments rose like frozen prayers. In Egypt, pyramids caught the sun at perfect angles. Their geometry an echo of the heavens. In Greece, marble columns framed the sea. Their symmetry a tribute to balance and proportion. Far to the east, the walls of China stretched over mountains. A living line between earth and sky. Human hands had become extensions of thought. The planet's own way of sculpting consciousness. 3. The flame of philosophy. As cities flourished, minds awakened. In Athens, men and women gathered to ask questions that had no end. What is justice? What is truth? What does it mean to be alive? From their wonder came the first philosophy. The first attempt to understand existence through reason rather than myth. And yet, myth and reason walked side by side. Two threads of the same longing, to find pattern in the stars. 4. The music of knowledge. In India, sages wrote hymns and epics that carried wisdom through centuries. In China, Confucius and Laozi spoke of balance, of virtue, of harmony with nature. In the Middle East, scholars charted stars, measured time, and traced the paths of the planets. Humanity had begun to listen to the universe, as though it were an instrument tuned to thought. Knowledge became a song, repeating, refining, eternal. 5. The pulse of empire. As ideas spread, so did ambition. Empires rose from deserts and coasts. Their banners carried by trade, by conquest, by faith. But even as borders expanded, the essence remained the same. The search for order in a world of motion. The Persians built roads across continents. The Greeks and Romans built cities of light and learning. In Africa, Nubian and Ethiopian kingdoms flourished. In the Americas, the Olmec and Maya traced the sky with sacred precision. Every empire was both a structure of power and a vessel of culture. Fragile, beautiful, fleeting. 6. The written soul. Writing now flowed freely. On parchment, silk, papyrus, stone. Each letter was a spark of continuity. A bridge across generations. Libraries rose, silent sanctuaries of civilization's mind. The Library of Alexandria, in its brief brilliance, held scrolls that described the heavens, the tides, the human heart. To write was to leave a trace that time itself could read. 7. The sea roads. The earth grew smaller, not by shrinking, but by connection. Ships followed the monsoon winds between Africa, Arabia, and India. Caravans crossed the Silk Road, bearing silk and jade, gold and salt. But more precious than any good was the sharing of knowledge. Mathematics, medicine, maps, and stories. The planet was learning its own unity. Not through conquest, but through curiosity. 8. The whisper of faith. As empires aged, hearts turned inward. New paths of spirit unfolded. Judaism, Buddhism, Christianity, Taoism, Islam. Each seeking meaning in the vastness. Each giving form to compassion, purpose, and hope. Faith became a mirror in which humanity saw both its fragility and its strength. Temples and cathedrals rose. Mosques and monasteries filled with prayer and silence. In every sacred space, the same truth lingered. We are made of wonder. 9. The fragile balance. Greatness brought tension. Empires expanded and crumbled. Libraries burned and were rebuilt. But through every fall, the mind endured. In the ruins of Athens, seeds of logic lay waiting. In the deserts of Arabia, scholars preserved the wisdom of Greece and Egypt. In monasteries of Europe, monks copied texts by candlelight. Even as darkness fell, knowledge did not die, it slept. And from that sleep, it would awaken stronger. 10. The light that lasts. By the end of this long era, humanity had changed. We had mapped the stars, measured the seasons, built bridges between lands and minds. Art had found beauty in imperfection, philosophy had found peace in doubt. The earth, through us, had learned to think. Every stone temple, every painted vase, every scroll and song was a reflection of the same miracle. A planet conscious of itself. The age of empires and ideas was more than history. It was humanity learning to see. To see pattern in chaos, harmony in struggle, meaning in mystery. In our next chapter, the world will change again. Empires will fade into nations, knowledge will ignite a new kind of fire. And the hum of progress will echo through machines and stars. For now, let your thoughts drift like the smoke of ancient incense, rising through time, returning always to stillness. The mind, like the earth, is eternal in its dreaming. Morning on the modern world. Cities gleam like constellations mirrored on the ground. From space, the continents glow faintly, stitched together by rivers of light. After billions of years, the planet is awake, and thinking through us. 1. The children of fire and stone. We are the descendants of warmth and memory. Of hands that shaped flint and minds that mapped the stars. From sparks in caves to circuits in glass. The story of Earth has always been a story of transformation. Our fires no longer burn only in wood and coal. They live in engines, in photons, in the quiet pulse of data. Each invention is another kind of flame. 2. The Age of Discovery. The oceans that once kept continents apart became pathways. Sails caught the same winds that once drove glaciers. And people followed them into the unknown. New worlds met old ones, maps were redrawn. And with every voyage, curiosity grew. It was not just land we were seeking, but understanding, of nature, of ourselves, of the infinite sky. 3. The whisper of engines. Then came the hum of steam and steel. The planet's pulse quickened. Trains stitched nations together, ships crossed oceans without sails. Machines learned to spin, to forge, to fly. It was the industrial age. A time when energy and ambition turned the world upon new wheels. Cities rose, lights filled the night, and humanity touched power once hidden in the heart of stone. 4. The voice of electricity. In a single century, darkness surrendered to the filament's glow. Electricity, light captured, harnessed, shared. It flowed through wires like blood through veins. Illuminating rooms, minds, and dreams. For the first time in history, night itself was optional. But amid the brightness, a new awareness emerged. That every spark came with a cost. And balance must be remembered. 5. The expanding mind. The world became connected, first by telegraph, then by radio. By cables, by satellites, by invisible waves carrying voices across oceans. Knowledge, once guarded in libraries, began to travel at the speed of thought. We built machines that could count, then reason, then learn. Each circuit echoed the neurons of the brain that imagined it. Humanity was building mirrors, reflections of mind within matter. 6. Eyes beyond the sky. Not content with continents, we turned our gaze upward again. Telescopes reached through atmosphere, rockets carried our curiosity beyond it. The moon felt human footsteps, rovers traced paths across Mars. From orbit, Earth appeared whole for the first time. A blue marble suspended in darkness, fragile and complete. That image changed us. It reminded us that every border, every conflict, existed on a single, breathing world. 7. The web of life. As technology grew louder, so too did the whisper of nature. Forests continued to breathe, oceans to sway. And the winds, those ancient sculptors, still shaped the dunes. We learned, slowly, that progress and preservation were not opposites, but two hands of the same being. To move forward is also to remember. The planet that birthed us is not a resource. It is a companion in time. 8. The digital river. Information now flows like water. Streams of thought, memory, and creativity weaving through the air. Billions of minds connected. Each thought a ripple, each voice a drop in an endless tide. The digital world is another kind of river. A new Mesopotamia built from light instead of clay. And still, at its source, is the same need. To tell stories, to preserve meaning, to reach one another. 9. The return of wonder. Despite the noise of modern life, wonder has not faded. It lives in the curiosity of a child watching stars. In the scientist tracing patterns of DNA. In the artist capturing a sunrise in sound or color. We have traveled far, yet our questions remain the same. Where did we come from? Why are we here? What beauty lies beyond the next horizon? In those questions, the earth continues to speak through us. 10. The future of light. No one can say what comes next. Perhaps cities will float upon the sea. Perhaps machines will help us tend the forests and heal the air. Perhaps we will walk among the stars. And carry with us the memory of blue skies and gentle rains. Whatever path we take, it will still be the planet's journey. Its minerals in our bones, its water in our blood, its gravity in our hearts. The story is not ending. It is evolving, softly, eternally. From dusk to dawn, from stone to circuit. The earth has dreamed through every one of us. Its story is written not in books or machines, but in the rhythm of existence itself. A whisper that began before language. And will continue long after words are gone. You are part of that whisper. You are watching whispers of earth. Sleep now, beneath the same stars that watched the world begin. Tomorrow, the planet will turn again, carrying us all into the next chapter of its endless, gentle story.